Hello and welcome to radio. I'm sorry, I don't want to say Radio Silence podcast. It's just instinctive. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Hello and welcome to Bolshevik Bistro. Tonight I have a very special guest with me, the person who is the owner of the Welcome to Late Capitalism YouTube channel, a prominent figure of Discord, if I may say so, one of the co-founders of the Crossroads server. Very cool discussion server that you should all check out. It's Pedro. Hello, Pedro. How's it going?
Hi, it's going pretty good, Eugene. I can
Yo,
hear
can
you.
you please move closer to the mic because I can't hear you very well?
How about now? Can you hear me better now?
Perfect.
All right, cool.
So, tonight, me and Pedro will be discussing Chile after Allende, and this is a very interesting subject to talk about because many people know of the coup that happened against Allende, and many people know of the failures of economic policies of the fascist dictatorship, but the Chile moved on in many ways, and it's really interesting to now have a look at what is happening in Chile now, and what was happening in terms of oppression, in terms of economics, and in terms of all the social stuff that is for some reason not really talked about even on the left during the fascist dictatorship period. And before we go on with the discussion, I'd like to make a couple of announcements. First and foremost, I'd like to give a shout out to our patrons, Ali Alvazan, Comrade Gultsov, and a bowl of cream and tomato soup. You are the people who make this thing happen. We are really thankful to you. I'd like to also say that to check out our website that we launched some time ago. It's www.easternmarshlands.com. Oh, by the way, Pedro, I can hear myself through your thing
Okay, sorry about that.
a
Hold on.
bit.
Let me turn that.
Yeah, no problem. It's just a bit distracting.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, so also you should check out vanguardmarxist.ucaring.com fundraiser, Cafe ZAPATISTA. It's a very interesting thing. You can give money to them, and you will be funding building school in Chiapas and repealing the liberals at the same time. All the information is in the link. You should check it out. Also, don't forget about our book club. We are having a really interesting book this month on 8th of. I wrote 8th of September. That's a mistake. It will be on 8th of October. We will be discussing Towards New Socialism by Paul Cockshott and Allin Cottrell, a very interesting book about how modern technologies and the modern technologies in socialism and what mistakes have had the social 20th century made and what can we learn from it. It's a really cool analysis, and many people all around in any Marxist sect and many anarchists really respect the book and the ideas there. We will be talking about the ideas in the book on 8th of October. The PDF to the book is in the description. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on everywhere. You can follow us even on the website, and you can turn on notifications if you press a little bell there. Don't forget to do the same for our channel, and don't forget to do this for Don't forget to follow us on SoundCloud, iTunes, or whatever. Follow the social media and drop us a line at emlpodcast@gmail.com. Everything is in the description. I'd like to say hi to the chat. I'm sorry we took too long. We had to finish everything up, make sure that everything is working. And let's get down to business then, Pedro.
All right, cool.
So how have you been?
I've been doing pretty good. It's pretty cold up here in the mountains. It's gonna
Nice.
be like Fahrenheit's gonna be like 30 degrees, and rainy all the time, but it's doing pretty good.
Oh, it's autumn starting here as well. Oh,
Yeah.
I can still hear myself.
Oh,
I think
sorry. Hold on.
it's better now. It's better now, at
Okay.
least.
Can you
Okay,
still hear
so-
yourself now?
Let me check. No, not at all. Now
Okay.
it's perfect. Okay, so yeah, it's been cold here as well. The autumn is starting, but like the sun is still shining, and so it's like it's so chill. Like the summers and winters, at least here or for me, are too intense. I like those, I like spring, I like autumn because it's like the sun is shining, it's not that cold, it's not that hot.
Hmm.
It's just perfect. And
I'm very much a
tell
winter
it,
person. Sorry.
excuse me?
I was just saying I'm very much a winter person. I love this snack, but that's just me.
Nice. So, tell us about yourself first. What you do, what have you been up to? Like, what you do?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So my name's Pedro. I'm a Chilean American. I was born in Chile, South America. Lived there a couple times and moved basically between there and the United States. Planning to move back to Chile soon, probably like within a month or so. So that'll be
Oh,
really interesting. Yeah. Um, uh, I kind of I study sociology. I was in school for sociology for a long time. I also
hmm.
do like communications. My big interests are like philosophy, especially like continental philosophy, existentialism, that kind of thing. I'm very like interested in like linguistics, like identity, that kind of stuff. So
So, like,
that's
some deep cultural Marxist shit that,
yeah. Oh
like,
yeah,
right wing gets really
hardcore
spooked
cultural
by.
Marxism. Yeah, I'm all into the conflict theory, all that stuff.
Nice. And how do you describe yourself ideologically?
I would say primarily I would call myself a post-anarchist, and that I'm a postmodern anarchist, not like a post-leftist. And
Hmm.
I'm an anarcho-communist, so I'm an ancom. Um,
Nice.
so it's fun times all around for everybody. Um,
Yeah.
Generally, I would say my ideology is focused a lot on like how power manifests itself through language and through like
Oh,
appeals to objectivity, and how stuff like identity is like very transient and that kind of thing. Um, Green
nice.
policy is also a very, very big part of my economics too. So,
This is what I like about anarchism, to be honest, is that it really goes deep into those, into existentialism, into the conflict theory, all of that thing. It's like it's really fascinating to me, and
mhm.
I strive to learn more about it because I believe like it's not that like, oh, if you're a Marxist, you don't do any existentialist shit or any conflict theory shit or intersectional theory shit. Like, I
Mhm.
believe it's really interesting stuff. I really want to go back to basics and read some um I, Foucault, Michel
Foucault,
Foucault.
yeah, Michel
Yeah,
Foucault, yeah, he's pretty good.
I really like this guy.
Hmm.
He's such an amazing person. Like, all of his work that is connected to uh, prisons and the
Hmm.
prisoners. Have you heard about it?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Yeah, for people who don't know, he was a really big activist in terms of the rights of the prisoners in France, and they have been doing a lot of protests. It's it's pronounced "fucko" as a goblin in
Somebody's
the
still
chat.
mad about the Chomsky debate. I see. No, I'm just
Oh, the Chomsky debate. Yeah,
kidding.
Chomsky debate is really amazing.
Yeah.
I remember there have been some videos um, of them talking, and the subtitles are fake. And
Hmm.
basically, they were like saying, would the moderator asked a question to Foucault. Um, do you think that postmodernism is out there to destroy the Western civilization? And they like all start laughing, and he's like, "No, but seriously, no, of course not. Postmodernism is not there to destroy the West, but
Hmm.
I do want to gulag every single white cis male." It's so amazing, and all of this, it's so funny, and I love the guy. And I remember when there were those huge protests with student movements in France, and he was there,
The
and
situation is international. Yeah.
yeah, and like it was so funny that like someone described how he was acting during the protest because he really enjoyed it. He
Hmm.
looked really happy while there was like people beating each other. It was like chaos, but he was smiling and he was throwing bricks at the police while trying not to spoil his very expensive suede jacket.
Yeah.
He was like wearing this jacket that was really dope, and he was like not trying to mess it up. It's so funny.
Hmm. I love the situationists. I would consider myself an anarchist autonomist, and I love the autonomous movement. There are definitely criticisms of it in that like by focusing a lot on like students and academia, like it can in essence like you do have to worry a little bit about it being co-opted, especially by like kind of reformist and liberal factions or anti-revolutionary factions. But like,
Hmm.
I think it's really important to get like the totality of like the like people basically involved in like a leftist like kind of action movement. So
Right.
um, yeah,
Okay, so let us move closer to Chile. And can you
yeah.
give us like a short recap of Allende coming to power and like what did United States didn't like that much about him?
So Allende was basically like one of the first democratically elected socialist presidents, like I think in the entire world, if I can remember
I
correctly.
think I think he was the first ever democratically elected Marxist president.
Yeah, yeah. So this was, of course, during the height of the Cold War, and so he was very interested in like nationalizing a lot of the resources in the country, and that was basically seen as like a big geopolitical threat to the United States at the time because for a very long time Chile had been an ally of like the United Kingdom and of a lot of like the rest of like Europe, a lot of the more like Western powers, going back to like the War of the Pacific and earlier than that. And so it was kind of just this the general movement at the time. It was like I want to say it was maybe the first or second wing of like the Latin American kind of socialist current that was going on at the time.
All right.
And so, of course, as we all know, the Americans basically sent in the CIA to kind of uh, like instigate the coup against Augusto Pinochet, or not against Salvador Allende,
Mm-hmm.
um, to get Augusto Pinochet to basically overthrow the government. And of course, September 11th, which was last week, it's a big thing in Chile every year. Um, that's the anniversary of the coup, and every year you have lots and lots of protests all throughout Chile. So like you have especially like the encapuchados, which are like masked. It basically means like it basically means masked people, I guess. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they go out and they basically get into fights with the police because you also have at the same time you'll have like basically like pro Pinochet kind of people kind of celebrating. You know, I mean, this
Oh,
same
there
thing
are still
happened.
pro-Pinochet people.
Oh yeah, there's even during the Pinochet regime, there were pro Pinochet people. Most of them were upper, like kind of. I don't want to say like upper middle class because it's kind of ridiculous, but like, they were like let's say petite bourgeois. There was a lot of petite bourgeois people that were very pro
Right.
Pinochet, especially like in the capital city. Basically, the people that were pretty wealthy were like, oh, I mean, my kids are in school and the economy's quote unquote the economy is doing better, so I don't
Yeah.
see what's so bad. But so yeah, there's still people that are in favor of it, and especially now in today's day and age, because kind of you have the rise of anti-fascist movements all throughout
Mm-hmm.
the world, or at least kind of their visibility, right?
Yeah, it's
And
more
so
visibility and attention that is given to the radical left. It's more and more of that.
yeah, so there's like a big reaction against that right now. So we have like a lot of kind of like mainstream Chilean conservatives are kind of like playing puppet for like the really reactionary, like kind of pro Pinochet people
Mm-hmm.
that like have always existed. And I would go so far as to say existed since before Pinochet, who basically are reacting against, you know, like these crazy kids going out there and blowing stuff up. We need to take control of the country again, and all this kind of stuff like that. You know, it's kind of very securitarian language that they use. It's not indifferent from what you see in other countries, or
Yes.
not or dissimilar is what the word I meant to say.
Yeah, but before we go into this, I think like it's
Uh-huh.
really interesting that we basically almost start with the end of
Hmm.
Allende, and I'd love to quote part of his farewell speech that was made on September 11, 1973. I think it's really like this is the message he was sending to the future of Chilean people.
Hmm.
It's really inspiring. Workers of my country, I have faith in Chile and its destiny. Other men will come this dark and bitter moment when treason seeks to prevail. Keep in mind that much sooner than later, the great avenues will again be opened through which will pass free men to construct a better society. long live Chile, long live the people, long live the workers.
Hmm.
Well, like this September 11th, 1973 has marked a very dark, the beginning of a very dark period of
Yeah.
the reign of the fascist government, uh, and led by Pinochet.
Hmm.
Let's talk a bit about the junta and
Yeah.
what they were all about. Like, how
So
did they operate? What did they do?
okay. From about 1973 to 1980, you had the military junta under Augusto Pinochet, and the idea behind it was that it was backed directly by the United States government. And Augusto Pinochet, one of the first things he did was throw out the old constitution and impose his new constitution, which still exists to this very day. They never
Oh, really?
changed. Yeah, they never ever changed it. And so there was a lot of the institutional legacy of his policy endures to this very day, especially as it pertains to indigenous, like the Mapuche in Chile,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the economics too. Of course, as we all know, we had Milton Friedman, who was the basically he wasn't a direct advisor to Augusto Pinochet as far as I can recall, but he trained the Chicago Boys, which were people that basically studied under him, and then
Mm-hmm.
went down to Chile and imposed his austerity policies. Uh, basically in an effort to like because Allende was had this program called the Road to Socialism, where like he
Mm-hmm.
was seeking to kind of cooperativize a lot of the economy in Chile, and he wanted to make it a lot more worker self-managed. And so basically, their whole shtick was the opposite of that: neoliberalism, austerity, laissez-faire, deregulation, all that kind of thing. It wasn't just that though. He actually, Augusto Pinochet also like had very, very, very um, aggressive, to put it very lightly, policy diplomatically with his like neighboring countries.
Mm-hmm.
So like he put like minefields on the border to Peru and Bolivia, and
Ooh.
yeah, and I'm pretty sure those are still there. If or that there are some of them still there, kind of like how in Vietnam you still have mines.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a big problem because there's a lot of immigration right now.
To the country
Yeah.
or from the country?
What was that?
The immigration to the country or from the country? To Chile or from
To the
Chile?
country. Yeah. Do you have a lot
Oh.
of immigration from Bolivia, Colombia, even as far north as like, or sorry, like even I was gonna say even as far north as like Colombia, Venezuela,
Mm-hmm.
or even Ecuador, you'll have like immigration going to Chile, and of course Peru and Bolivia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's been going on for a very long time. It's because of basically kind of the big like economic exploitation that's going on in like the more northern parts of South America. So they
Yeah.
kind of they buy into the whole like it's not the people don't buy into it, but the like Chile propagandizes as though it still has the economic miracle, right? Um, and
Yes.
to some extent, we can blame the contemporary Socialist Party in Chile for that because they very much kind of pulled the same shtick that like the Labor Party and a bunch of other parties, like the French Socialist Party, did, where they became a very pro IMF kind of institution. And Chile, they say, oh, we have the best standard of living in all of South America, and so they really
Mm-hmm.
advertise that to a lot of the other countries. And because of that, there's a lot of migration coming into the country, and Chile hasn't had a very long history of migration. So even if you like, this has been happening now for I would say maybe 10 years at this point. And it was like a big culture shift for Chile because uh, like I guess Chile is like pretty nationalistic, right? And so the legacy has kind of always endured in that way, especially because they've had very tense relationships with their bordering countries for a very long time,
Right.
due to wars over land mostly. So like you had the Falklands conflict with Argentina, the War of the Pacific with Peru and Bolivia, which go back to forever ago. And
Yeah.
so because that Chileans have had like a very big social unease with like the waves of migration, people coming in from you have people coming in from like Puerto Rico even, to come move to Chile, just trying to seek like a better chance economically. And so that has also contributed to like the general rise of reactionism in the country, especially because the right-wing politicians make a lot of arguments. Oh, we can't sustain all these levels of migration,
Hmm.
and we can't sustain these levels of migration with the levels of social programs that we have. And so, at every chance possible, they seek to cut that rate.
Yeah, this is like a general issue with the social democracy, is
Yeah.
that like it's not that, oh, we have managed to provide healthcare. Nice.
Hmm.
Now we have free healthcare. Everything is perfect now. No, it will never be this way, because there will always be the right wing that will be seeking to abolish all of that, privatize that. Like a good example is United Kingdom and the NHS. That is not
Hmm.
perfect. That is not like not the best thing in the world. But the same with like Belarusian healthcare system. It's not perfect. It's not the best thing in the world, but um, at least we don't have a position that is trying to abolish it. We're not the
Yeah.
best example in this regard. In Britain, Tories are all constantly talking about cutting it, talking about somehow restraining it. Like, this is why social democracy is never efficient, because it just bogs down all of those things that are necessities for the people in the political debate. And
Yeah.
with immigration, with all of this, economic growth is happening, so the people come in, and all those social programs start to crumble. In terms of like, there will be always the right wing that will start debating whether we should cut everything and just stop it.
Yeah. And because the left has largely neoliberal, the left, quote unquote, basically
Hmm.
the Socialist Party in power right now, they're kind of riding off the coattails of the Unidad Popular, which is the popular unity, is because of that. Like they're kind of making very, neoliberal arguments for like, oh, well, if we bring more migration in, then that will boost the national economy. But they're doing it in the way that like kind of the free trade kind of way, right?
Hmm.
So their socialism, it basically is just social democracy at best.
Can
And
you
at
can you
worst,
explain can you
oh,
explain like of what are the political powers in modern Chile? Like the big players, what are the
mhm,
radicals? Like, what is
mhm.
happening? Who's in power?
Yeah, sure.
Like all this
So
stuff. Yeah.
right now, the current president of Chile is Michelle Bachelet. She is uh, very much like loved internationally. She was the founder of UN Women. She had a long history of with the Socialist Party, if I can remember correctly. Um,
Hmm.
and I think she's one of the leaders of the party. But like basically, there's two big coalitions. You have Chile Vamos, which is like Let's Go Chile, and then you'll have the National Renewal Party, which is
Hmm.
kind of your like big right wing party, and then you have the IDU, which is the Independent Democratic Union, and they're kind of like I guess you could call them like the Republicans. They're like the mainline kind of establishment conservative party.
Okay.
Um, and that's like the one big faction. That's like the big opposition. And then you have the main faction, which is why is it my why is my memory eluding me right now? Hold on. The main faction it's made up of the Democratic, like the Christian Democrats, socialists. Then they have like the Party for Democracy. Then there's Social Democratic Radical Party, and I think the Humanist Party. Yeah, yeah, and as well
Humanist
as the
Party.
Communist Party of Chile. Yeah, and then there's also the Chilean left, and all
Okay,
of
what's
them
the
are.
difference between them? Like, what socialist party, Chile, radical social democracy? Who
Mhm.
like who are they?
Oh yeah, okay. So the Communist Party is just it's like a Marxist-Leninist party, basically.
Hmm.
Um, the Socialist
They're
Party.
building a vanguard and shit, right?
Yeah, yeah, more or less.
Okay.
The Christian Democratic Party is just kind of like average, like, kind of center party, right? I'd say center leftish, kind of socially conservative, but they're in favor of welfare and stuff like that. You see a lot of parties like that in Europe, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a lot of that.
mhm. And then Socialist Party is, I'd say they're a mix of like kind of progressivism, quote unquote. I think they're members of the Socialist International, and they
Oh.
yeah, they try to espouse a democratic socialism, basically, but at the end of the day, their policies are kind of crypto austerity. I mean, if not just straight up austerity at best, like how like the Socialist Party was like responsible for like the rising prices of tuition, which led to the big student protests, which basically have
Hmm.
brought us to where we are today. Um,
Never trust people from the Socialist International.
yeah, I know, right?
We should make T-shirts with that. Don't trust Socialist International.
Don't trust the Socialist International. Yeah.
Those are the people who literally are the Second International. They are literally these organizations that but reformed after the Second World War. Like, my fucking god, they were literally the ones who were the traitors to the socialist cause, who said, "Nah, fuck Lenin, and yeah, fuck Rosa and Karl. Just like let's side with the fascists."
Hmm.
They are this organization basically. They are the ones. Oh, we should support the war efforts during the First World War, and then like because we should abandon socialism until the imperialist war is over. Wait, what? Like, well, everybody's like preparing for a revolution, saying we should stop it immediately, and we should bring the troops back home and revolutionize. They were the ones who were, oh no, let's support it.
Hmm.
And then they basically reorganized after the First World War, and then they reorganized in a different kind of international, and then the second time after the Second World War, this is when they called themselves Socialist International. And this is when the word socialist became started to mean social democrat in the meaning of reformists who are pro-bourgeois states, and the communists became a radical left. So those people are not to be trusted, in my opinion. Okay, are you here?
Yeah. Sorry, there was a lot of background noise there for a second, so I went on mute.
Oh, no problem. So yeah, let's move on. You also mentioned so-called radical social democratic party.
Yeah. The radical social democratic party, yeah, I mean they're just another center party. They believe in like kind of liberalism, but they also, so in South America, there's this term called radicalism, which has a very different connotation than it means in the rest of the world, where it's not like
Oh.
revolutionary left. Radicalism within the context of like Patagonia, like within Chile and Argentina, refers to this kind of very nationalistic, populistic kind of like third positionism, and you can kind of see that with like it was like a kind of the one of the big factors that kind of led to the fascist movements throughout South America, and the aspects of it were kind of inspired like kind of Perón in Argentina,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's this kind of mixed economy, bring the jobs back home, that kind of idea. It's very protectionistic. Um, it's very, yeah, it's very nationalistic, I guess is the easiest way for me to put it. But it posits itself as centrism because it likes to pretend that it's not as like propertarian as like the other like conservative, right wing kind of people, right? Um,
Yeah,
so
I kind of get that. It's like it's really similar to Russia's United Russia.
mhm,
They call themselves a centrist party, and
mhm,
their program is basically this. It's basically they support nationalism, they support protectionism, they support. They don't have they don't do the whole thing with bring the jobs back and the national using mixed economy, because it's really weird that in Russia there is almost no difference between um, a so-called like a corporation and a so-called government corporation. For example, the company Rosneft, the Russian oil, basically. That is the main. This is the government corporation that is the organization that does all the sells the Russian gasoline and stuff like this, and they do the gasoline, they do the oil, and they send it to Europe. And this is what basically the biggest money back for Russia is oil and gas. And they do the oil, and they are the government organization. So basically, they are government employees. While this, if you look at them, they act in the same way as any corporation. They set their own salaries, they set their own benefits. You look at how they operate. They operate like a private industry, private company, and it's really weird. Like, it's basically plutocracy that is hidden uh, behind, not even plutocracy, oligarchy. It's oligarchy that is hidden behind the face of this kind of third positionism, protectionism kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, in
Like,
essence, that's what
yeah,
that is.
it's like a really creepy regime to be in. Like, to be honest, like, it's not a cool thing to be in. Like, Dugin is funny, but if you look at Dugin but unironically, it's not good.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, let us go back for a second to go back in time to the coup times and talk about this craziness, the Pinochet and the stuff that was happening. Like, what did he do? This is like a very broad question, but can you sort of tell what, like, he got the new constitution, as you said,
and then he imposed a lot of economic policy to neoliberalize the country.
Right.
The irony of it is, before his dictatorship even ended, he retracted some of the stuff that he had done, because I want to say the economic miracle, right? It only lasted for maybe, if I can remember correctly, like 3 or 4 years before it started to crash really, really hard again. And so he had to start nationalizing a lot of stuff again. And at that point, Milton Friedman started, criticizing what Pinochet was doing. And, I think at that point, like, America tried to distance itself a bit more from what had happened in Chile. And at the time, they were kind of, denying that they had any responsibility, though now the United States is pretty upfront, and they've pretty much, everybody knows that they had their direct hand in the coup d'etat.
It reminds me of this quote that is thrown at the left so often. The problem it was Thatcher who said, the problem with socialism is you run out of other people's money. Right?
Yeah,
It was her quote. Yeah.
She was actually a big supporter of Pinochet.
Yeah. I think, like, we could direct the similar kind of message to those kind of, Milton Friedman types. The problem with Chicago and Austrian School of Economics is that sooner or later you run out of industries to privatize.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Basically, yeah, this is where you get the money from. You get it from selling property and giving it to private owners, and then, oops, you don't have any more stuff to sell. Now you have to tax people. Oh, wait, the taxes are low.
Yeah.
Wait, you have no money. Oops, the economy is crumbling now. You have to return back. Yeah, it's really weird. If you look at the graphs, I remember, like, the funny thing about you mentioned this, that he retracted on a bunch of stuff. I've seen Democratic Socialist, the one, he goes deep into Pinochet and he talks a lot about him, because, like, a lot of people really still support Pinochet and say that he was good and, like, haha, helicopter, and we will talk about helicopters in just a minute.
Oh God, it's like one of my least favorite subjects.
But we have to talk about it. But, like,
no, I know we have to talk about it. No, I know.
Yeah. Basically, he showed graphs of economic growth and stuff like this, and it is seen that economy started falling, like, terribly. I don't remember what particular stuff was there, but what particular aspect of the economy. But basically, when he started bringing back social democratic reforms, we see this is when the economy starts to go back up again. Like, we literally see that when he came to power, everything became really bad in terms of lives of normal people, of workers.
That's true. Yeah, and that continued even long after he had left power. So well into
Hmm.
the late '90s, um, you had very, very high unemployment. I want to say at one point, I think it was close to 12.4% or something, maybe higher.
Right.
Yeah, it was pretty bad actually, and that's because there's a multitude of reasons as to why that is. So
Hmm.
you had both the combination of the fact that the Socialist Party had become more neoliberalized. Um, you had the combination of the fact we've had, as a rejection of those policies, our fair share of right wing presidents. And it looks like, Sebastián Piñera is coming back. So, that's going to be great. We're going to have to deal with him again after his massive disaster of the last time he was president, right?
Okay.
Um, and so, I mean, you can bet for even more austerity, much harsher relations with all other nations in South America. Um, Probably like a big rise in like right wing, um, just general like right wing sentiments in the country, harsher immigration laws, harsher border laws,
Hmm.
um, a social policy that's very regressive. Um, because there's a big Catholic component within Chile, obviously, that is still very behind the times on issues of like gender equality, sexual
No,
orientation,
Catholicism.
that kind of thing, right? Um,
Catholicism
mhm,
anywhere else but in Eastern Europe and America, United States meaning, is
mhm.
just bad.
It can be
Like
pretty
my
bad. Yeah.
fucking god.
We do
We
have
talked.
Christian, yeah.
Yeah.
We do
I
have.
said, well,
Sorry.
I want to say
Mhm,
quickly that like we had a discussion basically with a couple of friends. We were talking about different religions and different Christians and how they operate with the radical left, and like basically and with people in general, with the workers, and we found out that basically anywhere but in America, United States meaning, and in Eastern Europe, Catholics suck. But for some reason,
yeah.
they are seen as the good guys where I live. They're like
Mhm,
they have the image of like, oh, really positive Western, like Polish, not Russian. Yay! And while somewhere like while in America they have been known to create communes and cooperative farms and stuff like this during the labor wars and stuff like this.
mhm.
During that time they were really like really pro-socialist, and Jesuits, the organization that was created to struck down on reformism and on all of that shit, their leader today, they still exist, and their leader is a Marxist. Like Catholics are so weird, like, and the modern pope is really progressive, and he's like meeting with many South American leaders, and like he's really pro-socialist from the looks of it, but not outspoken, unlike the leader of the Jesuits. It's really crazy, like my
Yeah.
fucking god. So you say that this guy, this president, who may be the president, was an ex-president, right?
It's looking like that. Yeah. He's got very high numbers in the polls. Last I checked.
When
Um,
are the elections?
Elections are this month. Let me check real quick.
This
Um,
month. Oh,
yeah,
it's
they're coming up very, very quickly.
okay. Can you give us a rundown of the candidates? Let's like quickly go through the people
Yeah. So,
and who are running, because I think it's kind of topical.
yeah. So basically, the current Chile general current election, right? You have Sebastián Piñera is running. Like I think he's running independently this time around. I think he has around 38% of the vote. He was formerly aligned with the Chile Vamos, which is like the right wing group. He was president earlier in the 2000s.
What
He was
kind of
kind of like
right
our
wing group?
version of George W. Bush.
Oh, it's neoconservative, something like this,
In
similar
a
to that.
sense, yeah. I mean, he was kind of like the bumbling idiot president or something, right?
Oh,
Like,
okay.
yeah, he was not very like his policies were not very good. He it was kind of low key, very racist to the indigenous population, um, as well as to like foreign leaders, especially. like the Quechua people in Peru. He basically said, "Oh, well, my family goes back to Huayna Capac," insinuating it's like when you hear people say, "Oh, I'm 50% Native American" or something like that, or
Oh,
"I'm
okay. I see.
2.5." Basically, he was trying to like kind of legitimize himself and kind of brag about his South Americanness or whatever.
Hmm.
It was a big fiasco at the time. Um, and of course, you had like a lot of the big strikes happening around then. There were a lot of bombings, especially the anarchists. They were involved in a lot of bombings at that time as well.
Right.
And I mean, that's been happening for forever, but especially in Chile.
Hmm.
There was a period, I want to say around 2012, where anarchists were like bombing like government buildings and banks maybe every couple of weeks.
Oh my God, this
Um,
is so old school. I
yeah,
haven't heard about
it
anarchist
never
bombing
really.
since like
Yeah, I mean,
since 19th century, I think.
it was really a big response. I mean, well, they had a dictatorship for a long time,
Yeah.
so and it's still relatively recent comparatively speaking. I mean, 1980, you know,
Yeah,
most
many people
people's
remember that.
parents were alive back then, right? So,
Yeah.
um, it was I think it's a very real sentiment there, right? And so,
Hmm.
it's a combination of the youth movement and then also like the I don't want to say professional left because I don't want to give them credit for this, but the older generation of the left, especially like the like traditional socialist left throughout like the 60s, 70s, that era, that have kind of tried to preserve the revolutionary sentiment within Chile and not forget the legacy of the dictatorship there. So
Hmm.
that has very much kept kind of the general level of left wing action alive. Um, it's especially. Sorry, my thought. I just had a thought in my head. I just lost it. But like, especially when it comes to uh, like like I was mentioning earlier, the Encampuchados, which showed up originally during the student like tuition uprisings,
Hmm.
and then kind of became a big black bloc kind of like organization. And that's now I remember. Because on every like September 11th of every year, you
Hmm.
have them going out and fighting with the police, and they are very militant about it
Right.
because they don't they are very, I guess, mindful of the state repression and of the fact that we still have the fascist constitution, which has the same economic policy, which has the same policy on the Mapuche people, the indigenous people. You have the legacy of the MIR, which was the Movimiento Izquierda Revolucionario, which is the like revolutionary left movement, and they were like a guerrilla faction, like I want to say like a general Marxist guerrilla faction that was fighting.
Oh, I remember. There are
Yeah.
Marxists who use red and black. I have seen them.
Yes, they were
Yeah,
fighting against the
that's
Pinochet
interesting.
regime.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, the Communist Party was also organizing against the regime. A lot of these people were in exile because the Pinochet regime was extremely politically repressive. So a lot of the left wing people fled to either Italy or Spain. A couple fled to Argentina, but not, I mean, it's just kind of a global migration away. You had people going to America, Australia, Europe, basically
Hmm.
anywhere they could, because one of the big things about the figures on the Pinochet regime is that they didn't really make a lot of their extrajudicial kind of killings official. And so a lot of them are just categorized as disappearances rather than outright executions, which is what they were, right? And
Yeah,
so
it's a
they're
common
not,
practice among
yeah,
repressive regimes. They often do that.
yeah,
Yeah, people disappear.
yeah. They disappeared them. So you don't have records. You'll just hear about somebody not being around anymore, and then they'll find
Right.
their body maybe if they're lucky. So you had hundreds of thousands of people going into exile, and many thousands of people were killed directly by the regime. uh, very repressive of not just the communists and the socialists, but the liberals, basically anybody at the time. And because Allende had such a strong value for democracy, right? Because a big part of his policy was that as a democratic socialist, he put a lot of value into the democratic nature of his movement, that he was afraid of being perceived by the other countries in the West as being like a traditional Marxist revolutionary. There are some aspects of the left in Chile that said that if he had actually grabbed for power in the more like revolutionary way, that it might have been a lot easier for him to avoid what had happened. And then there are other people that would have said that it would have actually made it worse and could have led to an invasion of the country. So that's kind of an ongoing debate because he was very
Wow.
principled on that manner.
Hmm.
Um, and so towards the end of the Pinochet regime, the socialists and communists were kind of forced into a compromise with a lot of the like liberal and center-leaning factions and like the Christian Democrats and the Christian left, and they created a um, like a people's movement, right, to engage in a plebiscite. Because in like the late 80s and early 90s, Pinochet basically put up to vote whether or not he should run for president again, right?
Okay.
Because he came into dictatorship. He came in as a dictator, but legitimated himself constitutionally as though he were an elected official. So he put it up to a vote, and so to give off the impression that he was acting in a democratic fashion. When in reality, the people that were organizing against the plebiscite or organizing for voting no, so that they could have a return to, I guess, parliamentary democracy, were very, very much repressed. They would have police come to their house, harass them, intimidate them. There were people who, like, their documents were stolen. People be followed home. Party officials of even very moderate parties when we had to deal with that, and just general activists. I mean, there's stories of disappearances happening in that time as well, or they kind of justify it by kind of trying to paint the opposition as criminal, paint the opposition as violent, right? Because of the fact that there was a violent resistance against the Pinochet regime.
Right.
And so this idea that if the return to democracy would be a, kind of a return to kind of like this chaotic, violent Marxist way of things was very, very pushed heavily by the Pinochet regime. And of course, Pinochet regime had control of the media entirely. And they allowed the opposition very, very paltry amount of, like airtime or ability to communicate or kind of do outreach. And to the point where I think the most that they had was they had like maybe a 20 or 30-minute block on the national television station to say why we should vote no. And then immediately afterwards went back into, like, they had a big they had the government kind of put their own program on why, okay, so everything that those guys just said was completely bullshit, and here's why. And
Yeah.
that's all lies, and we have economic prosperity and militarily strong and strong border, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Strong nation, strong
Strong
borders.
nation, law and order, all that
Yeah.
kind of.
Trains
Um,
come on time and shit.
so they wanted to give it the illusion of that democracy, and of course, um, they won the plebiscite. The opposition won. So uh, Pinochet chose to step down. I mean, basically as a gesture, he could have, if he had really wanted to, just decided to say, "Oh, I don't really care. You know,
Hmm.
I'm just gonna stay president as much as I want." He chose to stay down, kind of as, I don't know, like an appeal to polity, an appeal to like being civil, I guess, to say, "Oh, I respect the mandate of the people." because he wanted to pretend like he was the democratic, like Western enlightened figure.
Yeah.
But of course, as we all know, a lot of people who worked directly under him continued to work to the government even until the early 2000s. And there were people that worked for him that were even in the Socialist Party, especially on the economic side of things in the Socialist Party. Oh, and yeah, to answer one of the things in the chat, they have a lot more than three parties. They have, I want to say, maybe around 10, 11 major parties. There's also the Broad Movement, which has a lot of the third party movements, like the Equality Party, which is like a social justice party, the Green Party, the Nueva Mayoría is the New Majority. That's the big kind of left wing, kind of left
Hmm.
liberal coalition that's in power right now. Not
Right.
yeah, not dissimilar to what you have in Spain, though the Spanish one is significantly more to the left. Right.
Hmm. Yeah, before we move on, I'd like to point out, like, you described this fake democratic feel perfectly,
Mm-hmm.
because what you were saying is you could basically apply to many ex-Soviet Union countries, especially, like, I would like to talk specifically about Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Russia is the greatest example because they have a so-called civic society. So there is the discussion platforms. There is the freedom of press that is able to talk about stuff and oppose the government and all of that good stuff, you know. But at the same time, they use the old repressive systems that are in play. They have been in place since the foundations of the Cheka, you know, and the KGB, or
Yeah.
later KGB, and all the systems, the centralized nature of education, of economics, of politics in general, and all of that, you know, of the media. It's all, they use basically really similar, all basically the same centralized systems to impose the suppression of the opposition. So,
Yeah.
like, I know that, for example, Foucault talked about those. We mentioned him in the beginning. I think it's cool to refer to him again. He mentioned the suppressive institutions, right? And he was talking about how institutions of the state are used to suppress the resistance while it will crumble anyway, right? He was saying something like that. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The difference between, for example, those institutions in the West and in Russia is that in Russia they are directly used. They are directly directly centralized and directly operated for this purpose, and it gives the illusion of freedom. It gives the illusion of resistance, even. Like, even resisting the power, you are still part of the thing. Like, you are just part of this whole crazy machine that is created to maintain power, and while you resist it, you are still part of it. And when you start to realize it and you start to do some real work, not just like go around shouting, oh, we should have democracy and we should have European values and liberalism and stuff like this, when you start doing something real, you just disappear. Or
Mm-hmm.
some anonymous Chechens just murder you in the middle of Moscow, like they did with Nemtsov.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's the latest political death in Russia. It's just basically, bam. Like, you, if you really try to expose the evils of the system and not operate within it, this is when you, like, really, like, this is when the system really turns against you.
Yeah. I mean, you can directly see that with in Chile specifically with the native people, the Mapuche, have had a historical resistance to the state from a very long time, going back to when they were fighting originally the Spanish conquistadors, and then the state of Chile itself, which colonized it. And of course, they were very strong militarily, Mapuche, and
Okay.
were winning a very they were doing very well against the Spanish for a very long time. Uh, but they couldn't, like, at the end of the day, they couldn't really deal with like the full brunt of imperialism. I think there were, if my memory of that subject, like the history of like Lautaro and like the like Andean kind of wars with the indigenous people, is kind of shaky, so I'm not going to get too much into it.
Hmm.
But basically, the Chilean government, thanks to Pinochet's constitution, still basically holds absolute authority over the reservations the Mapuche live on, which are very small at best. And it's made even worse by the fact that you had like Chilean frontiersmen and pioneers, especially farmers, that settled in the rural areas. And so they also had like tried to lay claim to like Mapuche lands, especially sacred lands. So you have the state serving as a medium for a kind of property conflict between like rural Chileans as well as Mapuche. And the fact of that matter is that the government has been extremely repressive of the Mapuche. Um, Very recently, there was kind of these very like bad images, basically, is the best way for me to put it, of police detaining and arresting a lot of like young Mapuche men in the streets
Hmm.
of Santiago who were protesting against the government. And if you
Okay.
go anywhere near the Mapuche reservations, there are like large armored military vehicles. It looks like Ferguson, basically, to be totally honest.
Oh, militarized police and stuff like this.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, um,
That's crazy.
yeah. And so the conflict keeps going, and
It's
it's
just
not just that.
crazy. Like, I'm so irritated by that. I'm sorry to cut you off,
No,
but
it's
like,
okay.
we are dealing with the same stuff
Hmm.
every time. Like, so we're still dealing with the repression of the native people.
Hmm.
Like, it's the same thing in America, in Canada, in Chile.
Hmm.
Like, why didn't we solve it already? Like, I know, like, capitalism is not the most efficient system in the world. It's really atrocious to many, like, to most of the people in the world, to be honest. But again, like, I still don't believe, with
Yeah,
all my dislike and mistrust and critique of capitalism, I still can't believe that we haven't dealt with it yet.
yeah. Me
Like,
neither. I mean,
it's just crazy. Just think about it. It's 21st
hmm.
century. It's 2017. There are military vehicles standing to Mapuche reservations
Hmm.
to suppress the resistance of the natives. Like,
It's more than that. Yeah.
it's like
Um,
it feels as if we're living in fucking Victorian ages.
yeah. I mean, the language itself is also dying. Because in Chile, for a very long time, this goes back to the Spanish. Um, in Chilean schools, if they caught like, especially indigenous children speaking in like the Mapuche language, they would basically literally demonize them, as in say that they were possessed by Satan, and they would be harassed, punished,
Hmm.
suppressed, like even like physically, like physically quote unquote disciplined if they were caught speaking their native tongue, like in school
Right.
and in public. This the thing was generally the same, where if you spoke that language, you would kind of invoke like the anger of like local kind of like quote unquote regular white Chilean populace, right?
Hmm.
Um,
So basically, it's a lot. They have been demonizing the local people for the longest time,
yeah,
and
and now their language is almost entirely gone. I
yeah.
think a very small amount of Mapuche people even speak their native language. Most of them are basically forced to move into the big city to be able to make money, and even then, when they do that, they're working very poor wage jobs in very kind of substandard living, and that's kind of ghettoized
Right.
You see the same thing with like migrants, especially like indigenous migrants, like you would see in Peru and Bolivia. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's this. Basically it's just the institutionalization of racism that endures um, to this very day and always has. The socialist government has a very piecemeal answer to this, and they try to address it by, we'll raise education on the issue, but at the end of the day, they're never going to step down militarily, de-escalate the situation, or give the people back their land that they have a rightful claim to. Um, if I remember correctly, that they have from treaties that were basically kind of revoked by the Pinochet government.
Mm-hmm.
And the Mapuche people were like had a very strong warrior culture, and so to this day they've had a history of violent resistance against the state, not just the state but local Chileans, especially local kind of racist rural Chileans, trying to like basically trying to encroach further onto their land, and then they get demonized even further, especially in the press. So, you know, it's
Okay.
it's the
Is
same
the
thing.
radical left doing anything with them?
Yes, there is a militant faction fighting for the Mapuche called the Mapu Mautaro. There's also the Humanist Party, one of the big left-wing parties. They're a libertarian socialist party. They are also have a very kind of uh, strong allegiance to the native people. There are also Mapuche nationalist parties within the government
Mm-hmm.
that are generally more left-wing aligned. Um, and you also have there's just kind of general secessionist movements, especially in southern Chile, because Chile is kind of very biographically diverse. Not
Mm-hmm.
biographically, sorry, geographically diverse.
Geographically, yeah.
Yeah, in the far north you have the Atacama Desert, the copper mines, and then in the far south you have like the fishing, and basically you have the central and like kind of the very cold subarctic region, and then the center is basically kind of warm, temperate. It's where you have a lot of wine exports coming from, and that's like where Santiago is, and say the majority of the people.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of have a lot of tourism based on the fact that basically the whole country is a beach, and they're also bordering the Andes Mountains. So uh, it kind of Chile likes to, like I said earlier, Chile likes to kind of put itself off as though it were like the paradise, the crown jewel of South America, more or less. And they'll say, "Oh, we have really good internet here," you know, that kind of thing.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. Damn. Oh, whoa. We covered a lot of ground, dude.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, no, no. That's pretty cool. I love it. There is one point that I'd like to hear you talk more about. You mentioned it, but you didn't go deep into that enough. I think. Um, Tell about the tuition uprising and like what did it? You said it started something. Can you elaborate on it a bit?
Basically, the prices of schooling were getting very, very, very exorbitant in Chile, and under even the Socialist Party, they continued to raise them. So, like, education was becoming less and less accessible to everybody, and so a lot of the students and teachers as well basically started kind of striking, refusing to go to class. They kind of occupied their schools, kind of like the Occupy movement. Um,
Yeah, it
and
reminds me
this,
of what they did in Paris, and
yeah,
yeah.
it happened all over the country. Um, and I remember even hearing about it because at the time when it was happening, I was in the United States. I remember hearing about it even here because it was kind of this big phenomenon. Um, and I mean, it continued for a very long time. It got very hostile. They kept, like, left-wing government, quote unquote, kept trying to force a compromise with the students, and they just refused to give in to a compromise. So the Michelle Bachelet tried to propose like free schooling as a way to get the movement, the strikes to end. But the strikes kind of continued to be a hotbed of like left wing organization and radicalism, to the point where I would say the average leftist feels very much represented by the kind of the student uprising, just as a general people, because of the like the nature of the opposition to this kind of inequality that you'll see,
Hmm.
especially in like on the fringe border parts of Chile. You have with the migrant crisis these shanty towns that people set up out of like trash and stuff, and so you'll have Peruvians and Bolivians living in houses made out of like tarp and boxes,
Yeah,
basically. And
like in LA, there are like basically like little camps where homeless people live. They make it
yeah,
under the bridges with huge amounts of trash, and they just like
yeah,
make those little camps where they use as a shelter.
yeah. And there are big communities of that because the housing prices aren't possible for migrants, people who are just coming into the country, especially with the fact it's very hard for them to get a job on account of the general xenophobia in Chile at the time, which I would say is getting somewhat better over the course of the year. It's a lot better than it used to be,
Hmm.
but it's still a very endemic problem.
I see.
And so, yeah, the Chilean kind of student strike was one of the things that reignited the left in Chile, kind of, especially because the social democratic kind of establishment government was trying its best to claim its position on the left as a way to kind of quelch opposition to the like to right and try to kind of absorb the entirety of the left as a way to kind of maintain their political power. And of course, that didn't work because
Hmm.
Chileans remembered the consistent history of leftism they'd had going back for a very, very long time. You had even like the Socialist Republic of Chile in the 1930s. It's very short lived. Um, uh, and you had the legacy of fascism because basically all of South America was Nazis during the 30s and the 40s.
Yeah, pretty
Um,
much.
and
And like, and in the 50th, a bunch of German and Italian fascists and Nazis came over.
There's a very strong case to be made that that had a very strong corollary link to the rise of Pinochet, especially if you look in like international documents. Um, the when America tried to ask Chile to no longer be to no longer have diplomatic relations with the Axis powers, they simply refused to do it, and so they kept open embassies with Japan, Italy, Germany,
Yeah,
up until like late 1945, I think. That continued to the talks in Rio de Janeiro, the Rio de Janeiro conference, um, and you had basically kind of the enduring legacy of radicalism combined with that, and you had what would always foment to be a very right-wing ultra-nationalist kind of agenda that would seek to prop itself up whenever possible, um, especially when you consider the fact that like because Chile continued to have land claims with other parts of South America and fought wars over access to water, over access to natural resources. So to this day, Peruvian and Bolivian governments basically, especially the Bolivian government, is extremely critical of Chile insofar as the fact that they no longer have a freshwater access to ocean anymore.
oh yeah,
Um,
the whole Pacific War thing and stuff like
yeah,
this.
and so as a result of that, they argue that because that was also a very mineral rich area, that they were basically completely economically deprived as a result of the fact that Chile basically said, "Oh, this place is culturally Chilean," or like this place of we misdrew the borders on accident, so our
Hmm.
actual border is actually way up here. which
Yeah, terrible.
if you look at the amount of land, it's rather small, but the ramifications of it were functionally imperialistic, at least in my opinion. And I would think the opinion of most people that gave an honest analysis of the situation at the time, yeah, especially given that the Chilean government had the support of, you know, the English,
Hmm.
and we're fighting against very poor working class native, like kind of farming countries, uh, like Peru and Bolivia. We're always very impoverished, always had been, still very much still are to this day. Was kind of very large uh, indigenous population, you know, was always exploited by the Spanish, always lived in these like kind of like sprawling capitalist cities that were basically built to force cheap labor into industrialized areas. Um, and so that's kind of led at all of these things together have led to like the current circumstances that Chile sees itself in.
Right.
Um,
What is the future? We see that you mentioned that the left is emerging, and we see that you mentioned the anarchists who are doing the good old throwing bombs and shit.
yeah, yeah,
Like it's not your typical black bloc Antifa breaking windows. It's literally, oh yeah, we should bomb shit.
hmm
That's amazing. It's just the fact that the anarchists in Chile use bombs to this day. It's so
hmm
old school
They
because
don't
they,
just fight against the police either. They also
yeah,
attack banks,
nice. That's what it's good.
courthouses, that kind of thing. So
Amazing. Bomb a courthouse as an anarchist. Oh my god, it's so reminiscent of the good old times of the anarchism.
yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
It's amazing. And tell me, do you think there is a case to be made for the emergence of the new left in Chile on the basis of the student movement, on the basis of the indigenous people movement, and the anarchist movement? Can you see that, especially with this new president, the old new president, who is likely to be in power, as you said,
hmm
and who will bring not a lot of good stuff from the
Yeah.
basis of it, from the basis of our discussion. Um, is there a case to be made for a legitimate leftist opposition?
I would
That
say so. Yeah.
yeah.
I would argue that there definitely is. We can see that kind of in the election itself. So the current coalition that is in power right now, led by the Socialist Party, put forward their own candidate, and he got nothing. He has very few votes. He's no real support. I mean, it's kind of this idea of, oh, let's continue what we have right now. I mean, Piñera is so much worse. Um, a lot of the left wing support, unfortunately, the left was kind of split between those two factions, right?
Hmm.
So a lot of the left wing support instead went to this other woman. I'm trying to remember her name, but she's with the Broad Front. Um, oh, Beatriz Sanchez. Yeah, she ended up like she's like a journalist, if I remember correctly. She ended up picking up a lot of like the kind of more left wing populist vote
Hmm.
because people just is like I said earlier, it's the same thing as the socialists in France. People just didn't want to. They had no trust in the government anymore, especially because Michelle Bachelet, she has accusations of embezzlement, right?
Hmm.
Um, like giving family members no-show jobs or like getting them out of having to deal with kind of legal repercussions for their actions. And so she's seen as somewhat corrupt and very out of touch with the average working class Chilean person, um, especially when you consider just the intense amount of poverty that you have in Chile, because Chile has probably one of the starkest forms of economic inequality in South America, in my opinion. You know,
Hmm.
you go to Santiago and you see like the upper class, kind of artsy bourgeois people sitting outside drinking in cafes. You go anywhere else in the country and it's still extremely poor. Farming towns, fishing towns, mining towns. You saw like dogs running everywhere. all throughout the entire country. Basically, no matter where you go, there's stray dogs.
Up and down the country,
Yeah,
just stray dogs.
yeah. I mean, to the point where like a lot of towns in Chile have like stray dog coalitions for dealing with the stray
Oh
dogs.
my God, it reminds me of how they had similar thing in America. Basically, in the States, they started to shoot down the dogs and to catch them, stray dogs, because they
Yeah.
spread disease and stuff like this. Basically, what happened because of that, there was a huge power vacuum, so
Hmm.
to say, in the cities, and the coyotes started to move in the cities. And now there
Yeah.
is a huge epidemic of coyotes, and because of the nature of how they breed, if the more you shoot them, the more they breed. And
Yeah.
so, like, America has no fucking clue how to deal with coyotes now because they dealt with street dogs. They have been dealing with them effectively since the 50s and even the 40s or maybe earlier. I think 40s was when they started to shoot them down. It's just a story. I remember that was a really
Hmm.
cool podcast. I know that people don't like this person, but like, chill. It's not all politics. Joe Rogan. He had an amazing dude on who is the author of the book American Serengeti about
Hmm.
the Midwest America, and he wrote also a book about this whole deal with coyotes. And I really recommend you look it up on Joe Rogan Experience. This discussion was a really good discussion. It's a really good podcast, one of the best. And look at American Serengeti, the book, and you can. I don't remember the author. You can Google American Serengeti and find the author. I really recommend it because it's a really interesting thing. I'm sorry for being distracted from the thing.
Oh no, that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
but
mean, I
yeah,
watch
like
Joe Rogan on occasion.
yeah, I do also. But I don't. When I see Sargon on, I'm like, nah.
Yeah, he has some people on that drive me nuts, and a lot of his stances are kind of weird, and he has this weird like warrior, manly man mentality a lot of the time. He's very
Nah,
like
that's yeah. This is just
yeah,
Joe
he's
Rogan.
yeah, I don't know.
He's a funny guy. He's a really good
He's fun.
entertainer. I love him. This is what basically inspired me to do the podcast.
Hmm.
Like, I just love the way he's talking, and I love that it's basically he was having conversations, and I thought, dude, having conversations with people, not just having produced content, but like having legitimate conversations is really dope and interesting. And this is why I started to think about podcasting. Oh, and
Hmm.
Socialism Barbarism was in chat telling that he was bit by a raccoon a few months ago.
Oh,
Oh my
jeez.
God. Like, yeah, America is just like doomed. Like it won't be Trump or North Korea or the crazy anarchists who will screw up everything in America. It will be the Raccoon Gang
The
and
raccoon gang.
Raccoon Gang and their alliance with the Coyotes. They will just overrun the state, and they will just destroy everything. They will
Yeah.
impose their dictatorship of the animal kin, and this is how furries come to power in America. Basically, this is why we should ban all the furry shit
Hmm.
before it's too late. Okay, before you go, like I think did we cover everything, or is there anything else you wanted to mention?
I mean, is there? I mean, you can ask me whatever you want if you feel
Well,
comfortable.
I think we covered a lot of ground. By the way, I would love to have you on after the elections,
Oh
especially
yeah,
when you will be in Chile, so that we can do
yeah.
like follow up to the thing. It will be
Hmm.
an interesting two-parter. You know, first part you're in the States, and before the election, then we'll cover election. I think it will be
Hmm.
really cool. And you mentioned in our private discussion Red Chile on YouTube channel. Can you tell
Oh
us
yeah,
more
yeah,
about
yeah.
it?
Red Chilean. He's a guy I've been watching for a while now. Yeah, I really like his content. I remember back when he had like maybe 10 subscribers or something. Um, he had put out a video. If I remember correctly, it's a response video. I watched it and I really liked it. And he had like Salvador Allende as his profile picture. And
He
I've
still
been
has it.
watching him ever since.
Yeah. The link to his channel is in the description. He's a good
Hmm.
source on Chilean leftist stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, Also, you can check out the Pedro's channel. Will you be finishing all those vids? Will you
I have
be
them
uploading
on
them?
my computer right now. I just haven't uploaded them
Upload
because
them,
it's
dude.
just
Don't be, because
Yeah,
like it's fucking YouTube. Nobody cares.
I know. If
You
hey,
just post it,
if
you forget about
if these
it. Yeah,
ANCAPs can come up here and just pull shit out of their ass, then I shouldn't really be worried about maybe making one or two like
exactly. Oh,
mistakes in phrasing or something.
you know that we once it was me and Barbie, social barbarism. I think it was me and him. Yeah, we were talking about right-wing YouTube on the stream and on the
Hmm.
podcast. It was on the podcast, right? And we talked about. He mentioned Mr. Dapperton,
Hmm.
and basically we had a huge laugh at him. Basically, not even criticizing his anything. Basically, laughing at the dude because he's just ridiculous as a person. Like we were laughing at the way he's acting, the way he's like has this mask and all of this stuff. He has like a legitimate black and yellow mask, ski mask.
Yeah, yeah, doesn't he?
Yeah, and
Why is it?
like
Why do they all do that?
I don't
They're
know,
all
they're
like
just
some dude in a
ridiculous.
suit with a weird. I don't know.
Exactly, and we basically talked about it, and I posted a video called like there was a whole. It was part of the podcast. I cut out the part about the um, Mr. Dapperton and posted it separately on the channel. And the
Hmm.
first comment I got on the video was from Mr. Dapperton, who I think has an alert on his name, or like gets up in the morning and then Googles his name on YouTube.
Oh my god.
And because he commented saying, "Oh, and I used the picture of this a dude with this mask on, with this ski mask and cap ski mask," and he's like, by the way, it's not my picture; it's a picture of my mask maker. And please redo the video if you may, and I would really appreciate if you would use my picture instead and not
That's
my
funny.
mask maker. And I'm like, what the fuck? You have a mask maker? And basically, a bunch of like, I had at the time we didn't have so many subscribers we have now, and we didn't have
Hmm.
like a huge audience. It was even smaller. It's small. It's still small, but like we have an audience at least now, and we had a bunch of people come over from all over the leftist YouTube who commented and like saying that the that he sucks. They were coming like your theory non-existent. Go fuck yourself. And like basically everybody was offending him. I got 2 dislikes on the video. Basically, I think there was where the Ancaps who came over who also uh Google his name every morning. It was so ridiculous. It was just like this part of YouTube is something else. Those people are are just weird.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
So like yeah, and they can do anything they want.
They really can. I mean,
And yeah, they can
stuff they
say
say is
anything they
just so
want.
antithetical to like
Right.
any basic criticism. You know?
But like a good example of just craziness with no basis is Black Pigeon. Black Pigeon Speaks or something
Yeah,
like this. He can basically say whatever he wants, the most reactionary, uh, sexist, ableist, racist stuff.
yeah,
And he can source um, a page but that basically completely gives an opposite point and opposite proof, and he can get
yeah.
away with it.
That stuff
He can
drives
just
me nuts. I think
exactly.
that that might be one of the things that's keeping me back a little bit on YouTube is like as a very like neuroatypical person, right?
Hmm.
I feel like a little. I worry sometimes about like the environment on YouTube, knowing that like I think a lot of people feel this way in general. Actually, like from what I've read, a lot of like people who are women on YouTube generally feel this way, and that like they have to withstand intense and immense, overwhelming criticism, especially if they get singled out by a like a giant right wing channel, right?
Hmm.
For like even the smallest things, or like even if they say stuff that's completely accurate, if the like right wing on YouTube thinks that it's ridiculous, they'll just get brigaded, shut down, harassed, doxxed.
Right.
You know, it's just a reactionary place, right?
There is a lot of it.
Yeah. Oh
And like
man, I think
it's
it.
it's
Yeah.
it's really like I believe that we can't really solve a lot of these questions because the only solution there is basically, well, I believe that we sort of usually create a sort of safe spaces for our opinions and for our outlooks. Like you
Hmm.
can easily go, like live your life on leftist YouTube and never see anything terrible.
Yeah,
Like you can do this, but at the
yeah.
same time, when you try to go out there, because like why wouldn't you go out there and check out other stuff and expose your ideas to other people and talk to other people, communicate the ideas? This is when you hit like the people who have the word gamer in their Twitter handle. And
Yeah.
this name, the word, so when you're self-identifying as a gamer today, it basically means that you're, for some reason, it correlates to being a neo-reactionary, um,
Anti-feminist,
anti-feminist, crazy person.
like
Yeah,
race realist. I don't know what. It's a weird thing.
white nationalists.
I think there's
Our
uh,
gamers will be
yeah,
gulagged.
to get a bit Marxian here for a second. I think there's something particularly ironic about how alienated a person must feel in society to think that gamer is a unique identifying trait for a human being.
I think it's
That's
amazing.
my identity,
We
gamer.
should do more of that, dude.
Yeah.
Why, of all the people, you, the postmodernist anarchist, argue that this is a not good identity? It's the best. Yes, do more of that. You are the gamer. Do that. Yes.
Gamer. That's what I choose to define myself by. I don't know.
Gamer,
I
gamer ethno states. That's what we need. We
I
need like
think
gamers should have their
yeah.
own country. They should
Yeah,
secede
why
from
not? That
America.
seems good to me. Kick out all the feminists that want to destroy video games.
Yes,
Gamer.
exactly.
But yeah,
They should. This is just crazy, but this is
it is.
this
It
is
really is.
what all of those all of those anti-feminist and anti not anti-feminist but anti postmodern
The
peeps.
rational I won't even say rational skeptics. Because a lot of
Let's
that did have to
yeah,
deal with like the feminism and the atheism, new atheism stuff. And that I think that's kind of dying at this point. And at this point, a lot of these guys are just becoming like alt-light dog whistlers, really,
yes, they do a
at
lot of
best. And
this.
at worst, they're just straight up becoming white supremacists and crypto fascists. So
This is a slow process of radicalization of the centrists. So like
yeah,
they may refuse this, but they are slowly becoming, a lot of them are slowly becoming um, outright fascists. And
yeah,
if you like, I precisely want to mention Jordan Peterson, who constantly uses, f- constantly criticizes postmodernism,
hmm,
and who uses Nietzsche of all people to somehow attack the intersectional theory, which is based on Nietzsche.
yeah. It is ironic in a sense.
It's the
There
best.
there are people who in academia who try to make the argument that Nietzsche was like essentialistic and wouldn't have been in favor of postmodernism, right? But I think the overwhelming majority of people can understand how Nietzsche's like theory can lend itself extremely easily to the interpretation of like the subjective nature of what we find in life to be enjoyable. We
Hmm.
find it like what the person we feel like we ought to become, but like in a sense in a way that deconstructs that as well. So I think like earlier what I was getting at is from a postmodern perspective, it has less to do with identity. In fact, we're kind of critical of identity and more with identification and like what like that because people have many different roles that they perform in relationship to the other people in their lives or
Right.
the other institutions in their lives. And these identities are things that we take on and put off frequently. We adopt identities and we discard them very regularly on a day-to-day basis, right? You're not the
Hmm.
same person at your workplace as you are with your friends or as you are alone or as you are like with different groups of friends or with your family or like when you're trying to date somebody, uh, you kind of emphasize different aspects of who you are, or like aspects of who you are change over time, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I think it's this fixation the right wing has with this stagnation of a hegemonic identity from imposed upon high of like the identification to the nation, right? Or the living of a just life in accordance with social institutions and traditions. It's very ridiculous. It's
It
really
is.
ridiculous. And
It
to
is ridiculous.
to tie it back into the topic a bit, a lot of Chilean poets actually wrote about that
Oh,
quite
tell
extensively.
tell more.
Well, one of my big interests is radical left wing art, especially in the United States and in Chile. In Chile, leftism has always been inseparable from cultural movements. So, of course, you've had most Chilean folk musicians are very left wing. Like you have Inti Gimani, Kilap Ayun. You have a lot of other folk musicians. You have Victor Jara, of course, was killed after he was like a national figurehead. He was
Yeah.
like the Woody Guthrie of Chile, basically, and he was killed by the Pinochet regime almost
On the next
immediately.
day, like
Yeah,
it was almost immediately. Yeah.
yeah, and so they all had to fly into exile. Everybody felt like they had to, you know.
Right.
And but one of a lot of the anarchist poets going way back when talked a lot about the nature of the working class people in northern Chile and in southern Chile as well, and how labor was very migratory, and they kind of were very. I mean, surrealism didn't really exist at the time. They kind of invoked a language very similar to that, where there was this kind of absurd nature to the livelihood of being a person who, like, you know, this this society kind of telling you to want a simple life, right? And that there isn't anything
Right.
necessarily wrong with that. But at the same time, feeling completely alienated and isolated in your own life from the things that you do, and feeling that you kind of live trapped where you work and live trapped economically, so that like it's not really that you're choosing to live a simple life. It's that it's being enforced upon you to basically deal with the hand that you got. And the result of that, and the fact that like in a lot of Hispanic culture, there's this undercurrent of fatalism that pops up its head, that you see a lot of the more radical elements within like South American culture very much rejecting that kind of idea of, that I have a destiny that I must uphold, right? Or at least
Right.
if they do still claim to that, having it be one that they can steer in their own like way, right? Or one that they can perceive any way they want to. And so, yeah, there were a lot of anarchist poets, leftist poets, authors as well. Of course, you had uh, uh, Isabel Allende. She wrote a fair bit. Um, Pablo Neruda, of course, famous Chilean, one of the most famous poets of all time. He was he also lived in exile for a time, um, because he was generally aligned with the left wing movements, right, in Chile. Uh, and so, I mean, I think that's another thing that we can look forward to. I mean, just even contemporarily, you have a lot of like anarchist punk bands and stuff in Santiago, and Chile has like a very thriving musical scene that has very much incorporated multicultural influence from neighboring countries, and just like a pan Hispanic kind of uh, the pan Hispanic kind of working class kind of basis, right? That makes up kind of like this kind of like rebellious kind of grassroots music as a resistance to that. And unfortunately, as a result of that, you see neo Nazis on the uprising, especially in the capital, I think it was about a
Right.
year ago that there were stabbings of anarchist punks in Chile by like brigades of Nazis troving around wearing phalangist symbols and stuff, you know, thinking that they were, doing the country a favor by killing like these, like poor and homeless and migrant or indigenous kids, right? Because that makes up a big portion of that group is a lot of these oppressed minorities and people of color. So,
It's the fucking 80s all over again,
yeah, it
pretty
is.
much.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, this is dark and inspiring at the same time. It's really beautiful. That was a really beautiful monologue. I think this is the part that I will most certainly cut out and put up separately.
Oh, all right.
Like, dude,
Thanks.
you're amazing at doing inspiring and touching uh, talks and speeches. You should upload stuff. Come on.
I want to. I used to do
It's
radio,
amazing.
so I think
Oh,
I think I could. I think I could
radio like in real life or podcasting?
in real life. I would did college radio when I was in college because
Oh,
I
nice.
yeah I was studying communications, so it was something I had to do like as
Oh,
a
dude, we are almost like before I went to the distant learning program, it's really weird, peeps. You don't
Mhm,
even need to get into that. Basically, now I'm becoming an English teacher. Before that,
mhm,
I was doing a course for cross-cultural communication.
mhm.
Basically, this is what started me in my academia. So, like, yeah, pretty much the communication, language, linguistics, all of that good
Yeah,
stuff. So, like, deeply, deeply cultural Marxists. We
yeah,
had even like we don't. Unfortunately, our academia is not that cultural Marxist, uh, like
yeah.
in the right wing sense of the word. But we did have a subject that is called comparative culturology. That basically
Mhm,
thinks that all cultures are the same, and the only way to compare them is not in hierarchical, in not using the hierarchies, but using the comparisons of aspects.
hmm.
And it was cultural Marxist enough, I believe.
Okay, that's
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah. Okay. And before we finish it all up, one question that is really important that I
Mhm.
think we should ask to every international guest that we have. Are there any Nazgûls in Chile?
No, there is a Christian left in Chile, but I'd say that they're center at best. I wouldn't.
That
The
sucks. That doesn't count.
Yeah,
Are there
no,
Nazgûls?
the
The
Christians,
problem.
the Christian right is, I wouldn't say that they even pretend to be left wing. In fact, they are very traditionalistic from what from everything I've seen and read. So I
Right.
don't think we have Chilean Nazgûls.
Yo, I believe I know a dude who was at a Nazgûl party in Belarus,
Hmm.
and he's an amazing guy. He's an eco-realist. He is a writer. He's a journalist. He's a really cool and intelligent dude. And in his youth, he was in a Nazbol party. And when I talked to him and I told him that Nazbols are a huge fucking meme in the Western left, he
Hmm.
was he was like, "Oh my fucking god! It's not even a legitimate thing. It's not even like a political opinion." He described it as counterculture.
Hmm.
Like Nazbols is the ultimate counterculture. When you oppose capitalism, you oppose the modern system, and you advocate for fucking fascism with a communist face.
Yeah.
Like this is like I think I should make an interview with him or something, a short movie about Nazbols.
The
I think
closest
it,
thing we
yeah.
oh, so I was just going to say the closest thing we have is that we do have reactionary elements within our left wing movement, right?
Hmm.
That's because I mean, in when I say reactionary, I mean socially, right? And
Right.
that like there is still very sexist, transmisogynistic attitudes within like kind of like I don't want to say like within like just it's within the general left, and it's not even a class thing because you see it in like the upper class like academic leftists as well as like everybody else. It's just I don't know what it is. I think there's this kind of weird anti-feminist-ish kind of I can't explain it really. It's kind of this
It's basically reactionarism. Yeah,
yeah, it's
it's
just
just
this like
reactionary.
vague thing that permeates its way into the language, and that like
Right.
yeah, with like the leftist criticism of right wingers will be to like call them like basically not manly enough or whatever. You know,
Oh, that's just
it's like as
silly.
if that's their problem, right?
Not manly enough? Yeah, they
Yeah,
just want to kill people. That's not manly
yeah.
enough.
I
That's
mean,
not toxic masculinity.
and you see the same thing on the right. Like on the right, they complain about their ridiculous crap too, right? So like I remember they were complaining about like you had like kind of like vegan and like general like left liberalish people complaining about the rodeos that they have in Chile. They have a lot
Oh
of
my god.
rodeos
Yeah, yeah.
and complaining about like the way that they treat the bulls in the rodeos.
Mm-hmm.
And like I remember that I think it was a couple of years ago there was like this meme going around of like just these right wing rural Chileans like being like, let's take all the feminists and tie them up to bulls and just you know all the criticisms they have, we'll just see them get fucking torn around throughout the ring and then see what they have to say about it, right?
Oh,
And you've
kill a
had
bunch of people. Fun
yeah,
times. Yeah.
if I remember right, there were actual
Funny meme.
protesters
Good
that went
meme.
to one of the rodeos and then they got punched in the face by like the Chilean cowboys, basically. It was
Okay.
pretty bad, you know. I don't know.
Yeah. I think this new left and the new generation, a new radicalized left that is slowly growing in popularity and growing in numbers and in quality, to be honest, globally, I believe will bring some change into this part at least, like because it's just silly to be the left wing and call somebody not manly enough.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. It's just silly. Okay, we had a really good talk. I really
Cool.
enjoyed talking to you, Pedro. It was really amazing. Uh,
Yeah. Oh, and
everybody subscribe to him. Yeah, please.
I was just gonna say I do have some stuff up. I've done podcasts with the Vegan Anarchist on their
Vegan
channel.
anarchist. I love the dude.
Yep,
Okay.
we did a podcast called The Late Leftist. I did it with the Vegan Anarchist and Aspie Freethinker. We
Okay.
kind of it went on hiatus several months ago, but we're thinking of starting it back up again. And
You should do that. That's dope.
I think I might be live streaming with a couple other people from the Crossroads sometime soon. Like I think I might be live streaming with Brumley.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm gonna be criticizing him quite a bit if I do, but
Where is the
it'll be fun.
go-to point where people can find the stuff you talk about? Is there? Do you have Twitter?
I have a Twitter. I have Tumblr. I'm on Discord. I'm on the Crossroads basically all the time,
Hmm.
even when I'm busy,
Yeah.
right? Because I have it on my phone. Um, and
Yeah.
then
What's your Twitter handle?
my Twitter handle is, I think it's at Pajama Ghost on Twitter. Um,
Oh, in one word.
no, at Pajama underscore Ghost. It's a picture of Pajama Sam.
Nice.
uh, it has some old stuff on there. Yeah, I think like if you go back, like just it was just generally like when I was like a SJW liberal for a long time, but I've started to get back into it. There was like a 2 or 3 year period where I couldn't get into my Twitter because I was locked out of it. Curiously enough, the same time I was working for a union is when I got locked out of my Twitter account, especially because we were doing local campaigning against the casinos because I was in New Jersey at the time, and we were having the casino workers strike. And we were organizing
Oh yeah,
against them,
yeah.
and
I've
all of a
heard
sudden I
something
can't get
about
into
the
my Twitter
casinos in New
anymore.
Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember there was a joke going around that the people proposed to jokingly to legalize abortions for everyone in New Jersey, so that people who come here and like make it the only state that legalizes abortions, so that people would come and with abortion you get some chips to play in the casinos
Oh my God.
to bring the money in the state. And there was like a joke campaign that they started and went around to talk to people.
The
It's just
United
a random
States,
thought.
yeah.
It's
The
just a
United
random thought
States is
that popped into my mind at this memory.
the United States is a police state, but New Jersey is the police state within the police state. Like living in New Jersey, there's like 3 cops everywhere you go, no matter what you do.
What about
It's
Washington,
nuts.
D.C.?
Washington, well, that's like not really a state. It's like it's the capital of the country
Exactly.
where the president lives, right?
It's the same thing, but without representation in the
Yeah,
parliament or anywhere
yeah.
else.
I mean, New Jersey arguably doesn't have any either because it's so corrupt, right?
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
fucked.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
dude.
well.
Okay, so everybody should follow Pedro everywhere. He's an amazing dude, and I hope you will produce more content. We had
Yeah,
an amazing discussion. I hope to see you after the elections to talk about the
cool.
aftermath and the future of Chile.
Oh, and just to correct myself earlier, the election's going to be in 2 rounds,
Oh,
on November 17th and then on December 19th. So I thought it was this month, but no, that was just the primaries that were this month,
oh,
or
okay.
I think kind
So,
of the later parts of the primaries. Yeah.
so we will have a nice Christmas special, which will be about elections in Chile.
Oh God. Well, it'll be
Nice,
summer down there, so that'll be nice. I'll be
amazing. You'll be in
sipping.
Chile at the time, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so okay, people, it's pretty late. I have to go to sleep, and we really had a cool discussion. Again, thank to our Patreons. Like, subscribe this video. We check out the links in the description. And oh, see you, Pedro. It was really fun to have you on. I love to have you on. Okay,
All
so
right. See ya.
thank you to chat. See you, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.